Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to break down the claims from a really popular video that questions how vaccine safety is tested and, maybe more importantly, how that info is shared with all of us. We're going to walk through its arguments step by step. So, the source we're looking at kicks things off with this big idea that pretty much all scientific progress comes from someone, somewhere, disagreeing with what everyone else accepts as true. It uses this as a jumping-off point for a much bigger argument. And that really is the question at the heart of this whole thing. What happens when that healthy disagreement gets shut down and just labeled misinformation? So let's follow the video's logic and see how it tries to answer that. All right, let's dive in. First up, the video starts by kind of setting the stage, defining the terms of the debate, and pointing out who it sees as the key players in this medical consensus. Okay, so the first big claim here is that the very definition of misinformation has been stretched. The argument is that it's no longer just about information that's factually wrong, but that it now includes basically any opinion that goes against the official line from medical authorities. And who are those authorities? Well, the source points its finger squarely at two big ones, the World Health Organization, or WHO, and the CDC. These are the two main bodies it says are defining the consensus that it's about to challenge. Okay, so that leads us right into the source's first major argument. And it's a big one. It's all about following the money and what it alleges is a serious conflict of interest. And the whole point here really is a question about financial transparency. The source suggests that if you can't clearly track the money flowing from drug companies into these big health organizations, you've got a potential conflict of interest on your hands. And to back this up, the source points to something really specific. It claims that the CDC actually holds patents on some vaccines and, more than that, gets paid royalties from them. The argument here is, how can an organization be an objective referee if it has a financial stake in the game? Okay, now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. This next point is a bit more technical. We're shifting gears now from the money side of things to the actual science, and specifically how the source claims children's vaccines are tested for safety. So here's the key difference the source is trying to highlight. It says that in a normal drug trial, you test the new drug against something completely harmless, an inert placebo, like a sugar pill. But it claims for children's vaccines, that's not what happens. Instead, a new vaccine is tested against another active vaccine, one that already has ingredients in it, like an aluminum adjuvant. And to make this crystal clear, the video uses a pretty clever analogy. It's like testing whiskey against bourbon. If you find out that bourbon has about the same side effects as whiskey, you could technically say it's safe by comparison, but you'd never actually know the effects of either one compared to something truly neutral, like a glass of water. Now, to be fair, the source does bring up the official reason for this, the counterargument. It's considered unethical to give a child a true placebo if it means denying them a vaccine that could save their life. The source acknowledges that, but still argues that this testing method just muddies the water when it comes to talking about safety. All right, so from that really specific point about testing, the video then zooms out. It broadens the argument to talk about transparency, what's happened in the past, and the data that it says is just missing from the conversation. And to build its case, it asks a simple but pretty powerful question. Has the official safe and effective label ever been wrong before? And it pulls out some historical examples to make its point. It brings up things like the drug Viax, asbestos, even trans fats. All things that were once considered fine, or even safe and effective, before we found out they were dangerous. The point is that the consensus can change, sometimes with devastating results. And all of this brings us to what might be its most crucial point about transparency. The source claims that the actual raw data from the research done by pharmaceutical companies is often kept under lock and key. And if that's true, it argues, then how can any outside scientist ever truly verify the results? To really drive this point home, the source throws out a pretty shocking number. 87%. Yeah, 87%. The video claims that's how many studies sponsored by Big Pharma just never get published at all. This raises a huge red flag for what's called publication bias, the worry that we might only be seeing the studies that show good news. The video also talks about a PR tactic called astroturfing. You may have heard of it. It's basically the practice of creating fake grassroots movements, groups that look like they're run by ordinary citizens but are actually funded by corporate interests to push a certain message. And it lists a few organizations that it claims are examples of this. You can see they have these really positive, reassuring names. The source alleges that these aren't real citizen groups, but rather front groups designed to shape public opinion. So, okay, after walking us through all these arguments about money, about testing methods, about missing data, what's the big takeaway? Where does this all lead? Well, it all boils down to this one powerful quote. The source's final conclusion isn't that science itself is broken. The argument is that we have an ethics problem with how that science is being paid for, how it's being done, and how it's being reported. So the proposed solution isn't to throw science out the window, not at all. It's a call for something the video calls radical transparency. The idea is that making all the data public is the only real way to stop any potential manipulation and begin to rebuild trust. And that's where this particular source leaves us. It's not just about vaccines anymore. It pushes us to ask a much bigger question. In a world where science and big business are so closely linked, what would radical transparency actually look like? And what would it really take to earn back public trust?